Today, we're diving into the story of three incredibly high-stakes meetings in London. These weren't just any negotiations. They were a massive attempt to decide the future for what was then one-fifth of the entire human population.
That is an excellent question. Why pack up and travel thousands of miles? Well, the answer, funnily enough, doesn't start in London. It starts back in India with a commission that almost everyone, and I mean everyone, absolutely rejected. So, by the late 1920s, the political atmosphere in British India was just boiling over. The tension was palpable. Britain was starting to realize that the old way of doing things just wasn't going to work anymore. They were forced to propose a whole new kind of conversation. I mean, just look at how fast things were moving. It was dizzying. In 1927, Britain sets up this Simon Commission to look at India's constitution. But, and this is a huge but, it was all British, no Indians. You can imagine the outrage. Massive protests erupted. Then, before the report even comes out in 1930, Mahatma Gandhi launches the civil disobedience movement, and it basically paralyzes the country. It's in this incredibly charged environment that Britain finally says, okay, we need to talk, and calls for the first roundtable conference. Now, the name itself was a genius bit of political branding. Calling it a roundtable conference, that sent a powerful message. You know, the whole idea of a roundtable is that there's no head, no superior position. It was meant to signal that for the first time, Indian leaders would be treated as equals in a discussion about their own country's destiny. So the first conference kicks off in November 1930. The stage is set, the delegates are there, but a crucial voice was missing. And that missing voice changed everything. And look who showed up. The list of attendees was pretty impressive, you have to admit. The Muslim League was there, the Hindu Mahasabha, powerful princes, and very importantly, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar representing the depressed classes. But their presence was completely overshadowed by who wasn't there. The Indian National Congress, the single biggest political organization in the country, boycotted the whole thing. It left this giant, unmissable hole in the room. Someone at the time came up with the perfect analogy to describe just how absurd the situation was. They called it a wedding procession without the groom. I mean, what's the point? Without the Congress Party, any talk about India's future just felt totally meaningless. But even with Congress boycotting, some incredibly important issues did get put on the table. The princes were trying to figure out where they'd fit in. Minority groups were pushing for protections. But the most significant game-changing demand came from Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. He stood up and powerfully argued for separate electorates, basically a separate political system to protect India's most marginalized communities, the Dalits, from the crushing weight of the caste system. So yeah, no big surprise, the conference was essentially dead on arrival. Even the British Prime Minister, Ramsay MacDonald, could see it. He knew that without Congress, the whole exercise was pointless. He pretty much sent a message back to the Viceroy in India, saying, look, you have one job, get Gandhi to the table for round 2. And that command kicked off a series of intense backroom negotiations. What came out of it was a historic agreement, a pact specifically designed to make sure the second conference wouldn't be a repeat of the first disaster. And here it is, the Gandhi-Irwin Pact. It was a classic political bargain, a real quid pro quo. You can see the trade-off right here. Congress agreed to call off its massive protest movement and, crucially, show up for the next conference in London. In return, the British agreed to release thousands of political prisoners and, in a huge symbolic win for Gandhi, relax the hated salt tax. But, and this is so important to remember, the pact was also deeply controversial. The Viceroy, Lord Irwin, absolutely refused 2 of Gandhi's other key demands. He wouldn't investigate police brutality, and he wouldn't stop the execution of revolutionaries like Bhagat Singh. That refusal would cause a major political firestorm later on. Okay, so with that pact signed, Gandhi travels to London as the one and only representative of Congress. And the Second Roundtable Conference, in late 1931, turns into the stage for an epic ideological showdown over the very soul of India. And this is what it all boiled down to, this incredible clash of ideas. On one side, you had Mahatma Gandhi. He argued that Congress spoke for all Indians and that separate electorates would shatter Hindu society forever. But on the other side, Dr. Ambedkar fired back with a powerful counterargument. He said, no, the depressed classes are a unique minority that has been oppressed for centuries. They don't need sympathy, they need real political power to protect themselves. This was way more than a simple disagreement. It was two totally different visions of justice. And this one single issue, this intense debate, just completely paralyzed the entire conference. All the other talks about constitutions and reforms just ground to a halt. They were stuck, completely and totally deadlocked. So, with the second conference ending in a spectacular failure, the road ahead just got a whole lot more complicated and a whole lot more hostile. The collapse of the talks triggered an immediate chain reaction. It was like dominoes falling. Gandhi comes back to India with absolutely nothing to show for his trip. So what happens? Congress immediately relaunches the civil disobedience movement. And how do the British respond? With a massive crackdown, arresting Gandhi and tens of thousands of his followers. But here's where the story takes a fascinating twist. Since the Indians couldn't agree, the British Prime Minister just decided for them. He unilaterally announced something called the Communal Award, which actually granted Dr. Ambedkar's demand for separate electorates. There was a third, much smaller conference after that, but the real legacy? All of these marathon discussions, even the failures, became the raw material for the next big piece of legislation. So here's the key takeaway. All that arguing and debating in London wasn't a total waste of time. It directly fed into the creation of the Government of India Act of 1935. This was the last major constitution the British ever wrote for India, and it ended up becoming a crucial blueprint for the constitution of the independent India that was to come. And that really leaves us with this big, thought-provoking question, doesn't it? When you look back at these chaotic, deadlocked meetings, what do you see? A complete political failure full of conflict and missed chances? Or were they a necessary, messy, painful, but ultimately essential first step in hammering out the very structure of a free India? It's a question people are still debating to this day.